Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Ethan and I'm 28 now, but the story of my life really began a long time ago. I was the quiet kid, the one who actually cared about school, kept to himself and never made a fuss. I was the type of boy who did his homework without being asked and stayed out of everyone's way. My brother, Sam, was 3 years younger. He's 25 now, but back then he was a loud, obnoxious, and utterly spoiled gremlin who acted like he owned the house. I'd be at the dining table, head buried in a book or struggling with math problems, while Sam would be tearing through the hallway, a towel tied around his neck, shouting, "I'm Super Sam! Out of my way, peasants!" My mom would just laugh, treating him like he was the most precious thing on earth, a delicate artifact that needed special handling. She'd make his meals from scratch, cutting his sandwich crusts off and packing 2 types of cookies in his lunch. His laundry was folded and put away in his labeled drawers. She even organized his school supplies as if he were royalty preparing for battle. The worst part? She'd constantly ask me to help him with his homework. It wasn't because I was the older brother, but because, according to her, it was simply my duty. "Ethan," she'd say, waving a worksheet at me while stirring a pot, "can you help Sam with his long division? He's having a hard time." When I would mutter, "Can't he just ask his teacher?" she would shoot me a look that said, "Don't be selfish. You know this stuff." Meanwhile, Sam would be stretched out on the couch, munching on chips and smirking. "You better not screw it up, genius." He'd toss a pencil at me. No one ever asked him to return the favor. If I needed help, reaching something high, carrying a heavy box, or even just figuring out a new app, he'd just shrug and walk away. "I'm busy," he'd say, not even looking up from his game. But I was expected to drop everything for His Royal Highness, whether it was a math problem, his lost socks, or cleaning up his mess for company. My role in the family had been quietly defined as Sam's personal backup. I quickly learned that complaining was a waste of time. Our dad was almost always working, often gone for weeks on business trips. When he was home, Sam would magically become a little angel, offering to carry in groceries or fetch Dad's slippers. "See how good Sam is being?" Mom would say, as if reading from a script. "You could learn a thing or two from your little brother." I was stunned. I was the one cleaning my own room, making my own meals half the time and getting straight A's, but none of that seemed to matter. My mom had already made up her mind. So I decided to handle everything myself. That was a huge mistake. It gave Sam a green light to treat me like his personal servant for the next decade. "Hey, he'd shout from the bathroom. "Bring me a roll of toilet paper." He never learned basic empathy or how to work for anything because everything was handed to him while I was learning life lessons the hard way. By middle school, Sam had mastered a new form of torment: psychological warfare. He'd sneak into my room and go through my personal stuff. One day he found my diary, a stupid move in hindsight. He read every page and then ran to Mom with a smug grin. "Mom, guess what Ethan wrote? He has a crush on Melissa from math class and thinks his nose is too big." My blood ran cold. "That was private. You went through my stuff." I stormed into the room. He just leaned against the wall and smirked. "Maybe you shouldn't write such pathetic stuff if you don't want people to laugh at it," he said. Mom just chuckled from the kitchen. "Oh, come on, that's just how brothers are." She turned back to her cooking, and I realized she wasn't going to do a thing. School was a special kind of hell, and Sam knew exactly what buttons to push. When older kids started picking on me, he didn't have my back. Instead, he joined in. "Isn't this the kid who cried when he got a B+?" One of them would laugh, and Sam would be right there. "Yeah, and he writes love poems to himself in his diary," he'd say, feeding them ammunition with stuff he'd overheard at home. The insults, "ugly, loser, hairy monkey," were cruel, but what hurt most was my own brother laughing along and adding his own jabs. He knew I slept with a nightlight and cried during Disney movies, and he weaponized every little insecurity. He knew these things because he lived in my house, and I had trusted him. Nothing was off limits. The breaking point was one of our usual fights. I don't even remember what started it, probably something simple, but it escalated fast. He stood there, staring me down and said, "You should kill yourself," just like that, with no hesitation. My brain couldn't process the words. When I didn't respond, he doubled down. "Seriously, nobody would even miss you. You're just taking up space in this family." I was already struggling with my mental health, feeling like an outcast at home and school, and his words burned into my memory. My dad was mostly absent, and my mom had already decided I was the problem, always blaming me. "Why do you two always have to fight?" she'd snap, as if we were equally to blame. "You're older. Set a better example." She just wasn't listening. Then came the hair-burning incident. That was the moment everything finally cracked. I was at my desk, headphones on, minding my own business. Sam walked up behind me with a lighter, flicked it on, and leaned in, trying to set my hair on fire. I freaked out and ran to my mom. Sam just tried to set my hair on fire, I shouted. She just stared at me. Oh, come on, he was just playing around, she said, waving a hand dismissively. But this time Dad was home. He had just walked in and heard everything. He saw the panic in my voice and the lighter in Sam's hand, and something finally snapped. Enough is enough, he barked at Sam. You need to start respecting your older brother. It was just a few words, but it felt like the validation I had been waiting for my entire life. That night, Dad pulled me aside in the garage. I expected a lecture, but instead he said, I should have stepped in sooner. Sam is becoming a bully, and none of this is your fault, Ethan. None of it. I looked up at him, and it felt like that scene from Good Will Hunting, where Robin Williams keeps saying, it's not your fault. This wasn't about general trauma. It was about years of psychological abuse from my own brother. I almost broke down right there. Someone had finally seen what was happening. Someone believed me. He didn't just stop with words. The next day, he marched into my school and talked to the principal about the bullying and how Sam was feeding them information. Suddenly, the kids who had made my life a living hell were facing real consequences. Detentions and calls home. Then Dad enrolled me in MMA classes. You need to learn to stand up for yourself, he said. Not just physically, but mentally too. I laughed. A dry, bitter laugh. What's a scrawny kid like me going to do in a gym full of cage fighters? He put a hand on my shoulder. You'll learn. Trust me. So I walked into that gym feeling like Napoleon Dynamite with a backpack full of library books. I was the lanky kid in oversized glasses, and everyone else looked like they benched cars for fun. But when I decided to learn something, I stuck with it. I carved out time for the gym every day. The transformation was slow but real. 6 months later, I had put on muscle and learned how to fight. My reflexes were faster. I knew how to control my breathing, and most importantly, I had confidence. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking around waiting for the next hit, verbal or otherwise. When Sam pulled his usual stunt, it was different this time. I had been saving money from chores and tutoring. It wasn't a lot, but it was mine. Sam, being Sam, decided to help himself to it. I caught him halfway out the door, money in his hand, laughing. Where do you think you're going? I asked, stepping into the hallway. He looked me over like I was still the same pushover. Relax, nerd. It's just some cash. You'll live. I stepped closer. That's my money. I earned it. He rolled his eyes and smirked. What are you gonna do, huh? Run to daddy again? Cry about it like the little bitch you are. That was it. My right hand just moved. My right hand just moved. It was a clean, sharp hook, exactly what my coach taught me. It landed square on his jaw, and he went down like a sack of potatoes. There was no cinematic drama, just a solid hit, and he was on the floor, stunned. I reached into his pocket, took my money back, and stood over him calmly. For the first time in years, I was in control. The look on his face, shocked, scared, betrayed, was priceless. He couldn't believe his personal punching bag had finally grown teeth. Sam started crying, not from the punch itself, but from the fact that he had lost. You psycho! I'm telling Mom. You attacked me for no reason, he screamed. Mom came running, saw Sam on the floor, and immediately lost it. What did you do to him? She screamed, pushing me back. You hit your brother? Before I could answer, Dad walked in from the garage. He stole money from Ethan, I said. He was walking out the door with it. Dad's voice was like steel. Is that true? He asked Sam. Sam just sobbed louder, avoiding the question. Dad turned to me, calm but firm. He's lucky you just punched him. Anyone else would have called the cops. That was all. No grounding, no lecture, just validation. From that point on, Sam kept his distance. He'd still mutter insults, but the dynamic had shifted. He knew he couldn't physically intimidate me anymore, and I saw the fear in his eyes. The verbal abuse didn't stop completely, but now it felt different, like the desperate whining of someone who had lost all his power. He tried to get under my skin, but it didn't work anymore because I finally knew who I was. College became my escape route. I got a full scholarship to my dream school, and for the first time I felt genuinely proud. Dad threw me a party, and I could see how proud he was. Even Mom seemed happy. Sam just sulked in the corner. College won't fix your personality problems, he muttered, but I just ignored him. I had spent too many years letting his words sink in. That fall, I started college with a new outlook, away from home and all the old baggage. It was a clean slate. My sophomore year, I met Claire at a frat party. I was about to leave, but a friend dragged me along. And there she was, standing near the drink table, looking as unimpressed as I felt. We started talking and couldn't stop. She was smart, funny, and she really listened. Not the fake kind of listening, but the kind where her eyes stayed on you and her face actually reacted. Do you ever feel like you're the only one at these things who isn't pretending to be someone else? I asked her. She grinned. Every single time. It's like watching a costume party where everyone forgot their costume. We clicked instantly. Claire came from a loving, tight-knit family. She was the first person I ever dated who made me feel like I could breathe. I didn't have to earn her kindness. It was just there. We started dating seriously, and for the first time in my life, I had something that was completely mine, separate from all the dysfunction I had grown up with. Claire was my fresh start. Her family had strong beliefs, especially about sex before marriage. But we were young and in love, and one night during our senior year, things got carried away. She got pregnant. It was a shock, but it didn't feel like a disaster. We loved each other and had already talked about a future, so we decided to get married right after graduation. Looking back, maybe we rushed it, but at the time it felt right. We had a small, meaningful wedding. I stood at the altar looking at Claire, and I genuinely believed she was the one. My person. She was everything I'd ever wanted. Loyal, supportive, kind. I was going to be a one-woman man, like in those old black and white movies. Over the years, I never entertained interest from other women. We had our routines down perfectly. Saturdays were for zoo trips or grocery runs, and Sundays were for church and cartoons on the couch. It was predictable, stable, and everything I thought I wanted. But looking back now, the signs were all there. Claire started having these moments where she'd zone out. I'd be talking, and she'd get this look on her face, like her mind was 1,000 miles away. When I'd ask if she was okay, she'd blink and come back to me. "Yeah, I'm fine," she'd say. "Just tired." I believed her. She had a demanding job and we had a kid. Tired was part of the deal. Then there was her phone. She used to leave it on the counter unlocked. Suddenly, she was carrying it everywhere. The bathroom, the laundry room, even to grab the mail. One night, I joked, "What, you got state secrets on there or something?" She didn't laugh. She just gave me a tight smile. "Paranoid much?" she said, already walking away. "It's sad you think I'm hiding something." I dropped it. I didn't want to fight. The coldness came slowly. I'd reach for her hand while watching TV, and there would be no warmth. I'd wrap my arms around her in the kitchen, and she'd keep chopping vegetables like I wasn't there. Our sex life took a nosedive, too. At first, it was the usual stuff: long days, our son Leo's sleep schedule, headaches. But it became a pattern, a wall. I brushed it off, telling myself the passion fades after a few years of marriage. She also started working late more often. "Big project," she'd say, grabbing her bag. "The client's a nightmare. Don't wait up." She was ambitious, and I respected that. I picked up the slack at home. But the weirdest thing was how she started acting at family gatherings. She used to be relaxed around my family, but lately, she seemed jumpy, distracted. I catch her having these weirdly intense conversations with Sam. They'd stand close, whispering, and as soon as I walked over, they'd break apart like they'd been caught doing something wrong. "What were you guys talking about?" I asked once. "Oh, just catching up," she said. "He was asking about work stuff." Sam nodded along. I thought, wow, maybe they're finally getting along. I even felt hopeful, thinking she was being a bridge between us. What a joke. I told myself it was all normal. Work stress, getting older, the natural evolution of a long-term relationship. I was so focused on being the good husband and dependable father that I never considered what might really be going on. It's easier to live in denial when the truth threatens to shatter the world you've built. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed. My cousin Maria called and asked to meet for lunch. "I need to talk to you about something important," she said. I assumed it was family logistics, but the second I walked into the diner and saw her, something in my chest tightened. Her hands were fidgeting with her coffee cup, and she wasn't making eye contact. "Hey," I said, sliding into the booth. "Everything okay?" She looked down into her cup. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low and shaky. "I really don't know how to say this." My stomach dropped. Conversations that start like that never end well. "It's about Claire and Sam," she said softly. Just hearing their names together made my blood run cold. My throat felt dry. "What about them?" I asked. Maria looked around, then leaned in close, her voice barely a whisper. "At the last family barbecue, you remember, right? You were helping Uncle Rob with the grill, and Leo was showing you his stick collection." I nodded slowly. "I went inside to use the bathroom," she said, "and I heard voices coming from the kitchen. It was Claire and Sam, and they were being pretty loud." She bit her lip. I heard Claire say, "You said it would just be one time. What if he's yours? What if they find out?" My blood ran cold. Maria repeated the words, her eyes wide with disbelief. She said Claire sounded panicked and hysterical, and Sam was trying to calm her down, telling her to lower her voice and that nobody would ever know. The conversation had ended abruptly when someone else came into the kitchen. Maria had slipped out, pretending she hadn't heard a thing. "I've been wrestling with whether to tell you for weeks," she said, her voice cracking. "But I couldn't live with myself if I stayed quiet. I just sat there, frozen." The words echoed in my mind, What if he's yours? There was only one possible interpretation, and it was a scenario that had never even entered my worst nightmares. My wife, my brother, my son. I think I'm going to go, I said. My voice probably sounded calm, but my hands were shaking under the table. I drove home in a daze, unable to remember most of the trip. That night, I started paying attention. All the little things I had brushed off before came rushing back with horrifying clarity. The way Claire and Sam would glance at each other, the way they'd stop talking when I entered a room, the way her voice would change when she mentioned his name. I couldn't ignore it anymore, so I became a detective in my own life. I checked her phone records, credit card statements, and travel histories. The evidence was everywhere. Hotel charges on days she claimed to be working late. Deleted text messages that still showed up in the call logs. Business trips that coincided with Sam suddenly being unavailable. This had been going on for years. While I was busy being the devoted husband and father, they were living a double life. I could have lost my mind, but I didn't. Within a week of Maria's revelation, I went into strategic mode. This wasn't going to be some emotional explosion. I was going to protect myself, protect Leo, and make sure I didn't get screwed over. First, I went to see my best friend, Mike, who had become a family lawyer. He didn't sugarcoat anything. "You're going to need someone ruthless," he said. He recommended a family law attorney who specialized in high-conflict divorces. Within 48 hours, I had a meeting. Mr. Harrison, the lawyer, was sharp and no nonsense. "The first thing we do is file for a paternity test through the court," he said. "Once that's in motion, you document everything." So I did. I started compiling every piece of evidence I had. Screenshots, copies of credit card statements, and a detailed timeline. I created spreadsheets and organized files. The whole thing felt surreal, like I was building a case against a stranger. But it wasn't a stranger. It was my wife and my brother. Next, I protected my assets. I opened a separate bank account, slowly transferring money out of our joint account. I canceled shared credit cards, changed all my passwords, and stored copies of important documents at Mike's office. By the end of the week, the divorce papers were filed. Since we lived in an at-fault state, Claire's adultery would directly influence the property division and the custody battle. Mr. Harrison was confident. "If Leo is yours, we go for full custody. Judges don't look kindly on infidelity involving immediate family." I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt focused. Only when every legal and financial angle was secure did I decide to confront Claire. I waited until Leo was at a sleepover. She was in the living room, curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I stood in the hallway for a second, watching this woman I had loved, before stepping in. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and flat, carrying the weight of everything I'd been holding in. She looked up, and I saw the shift, the tension in her shoulders. She knew. She didn't know how much I knew, but she knew this wasn't a normal conversation. I walked over, set the folder on the coffee table, and opened it slowly. Inside were phone records, credit card statements with hotel charges and screenshots. It wasn't speculation. It was evidence. She leaned forward, scanning the pages, and her face went from confusion to denial to panic. Her hands trembled. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Finally, there was resignation. She knew the truth. "I can explain," she started, her voice already cracking. "Go ahead," I said, sitting back and crossing my arms. "Explain how you've been sleeping with my brother for years." The bluntness of it hit her like a slap. Her face crumpled, and she started sobbing like she was the one who had been betrayed. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said through her tears. "Sam and I just connected on a level you and I never did. He actually listens to me, makes me feel like I matter." I stayed silent, my jaw tight. I knew there was more. "You're always working late," she continued. "Always focused on your career. When was the last time you asked me how my day really went?" That's when I realized she was going to try and twist this into my fault. "So because I work hard to provide for our family," I said slowly, "you decided to cheat with my brother? It's not that simple," she snapped, and her tone shifted from crying to fire. "You don't understand what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage. Sam makes me feel alive and wanted. With you, I feel like just another item on your to-do list." I stared at her. "What did I do wrong, Claire? Really? Spell it out." She got quiet for a moment, but then I said it. "You've been lying to me for years about possibly raising another man's child. My brother's child. Meanwhile, I've been going to work every day, saving for Leo's college, thinking I'm building a life with a woman who actually cares. What did I do to deserve that?" That's when she completely went off the rails. "Don't you dare judge me," she screamed, jumping up. "You think you're this perfect husband, but you're not. You're cold, you're distant." She was unraveling. "Sam remembers little things about me that you forgot years ago. He makes me laugh. He treats me like a woman instead of..." Then why did you marry me? I shot back, standing now. Why waste years of my life and money I worked hard for just so you could cheat? For what? For a deadbeat who can't even pay his own damn bills. She didn't flinch. You want to know the truth? Yes, it's your fault, she yelled. If you had been the husband I needed, I never would have looked elsewhere. She actually believed it. She believed her affair could be justified because I wasn't attentive enough. It was unbelievable. I let her finish, waiting for her to burn herself out. Then, without a word, I pulled the divorce papers from the folder and laid them on the coffee table. Well, I said, my voice steady, you don't have to worry about any of that anymore. Claire stared at the documents, her face going completely white. What is this? She asked, barely above a whisper. Divorce papers, I said. You've been served. This wasn't some dramatic argument that would end in forgiveness. This was final. You can't be serious, she said, trembling. You're just going to throw away our entire marriage over a mistake? I laughed bitterly. Funny how you're calling it a mistake. You don't even know if our son is actually mine. That's not a mistake, Claire. That's a complete betrayal. Her panic turned to desperation, and she tried one last card. What about Leo? She said, her eyes welling with tears. I stared at her, my heart hammering, but my face unreadable. Leo is not my problem anymore, I said. The paternity test will determine who his real father is, and that person can take responsibility for him. That broke her. She completely lost it, screaming and calling me heartless. I was already at the door, grabbing my keys and walking out into the night. Behind me, I could hear her wailing, but for the first time in months, I felt calm. I wasn't done. Next stop, Mom and Dad's house. They were in the living room, and I sat down across from them and told them everything. Dad looked stunned, but Mom's reaction was exactly what I expected. That can't be true, she said, shaking her head. Sam would never do something like that. I had come prepared. Don't say anything, I said, pulling out my phone. I called Sam and put him on speaker. I know about you and Claire, I said flatly. She confessed everything. There was a pause, and then Sam slipped into his smug tone. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. I started laying out the specifics, dates, hotel names, credit card charges. That's when his facade cracked. Look, he said. It's not my fault if women prefer me over you. Maybe if you weren't such a boring, uptight little bitch, your wife wouldn't have needed to find excitement elsewhere. The room went dead silent. Mom's hand was frozen around her coffee cup. Dad's jaw clenched. She came on to me, by the way, Sam continued, like he was proud of it. She kept telling me how miserable she was with you. I didn't blink. Thanks for confirming everything, bro, I said. Mom and Dad heard every word of this conversation. The silence on the other end was deafening. Dad took the phone from me, his hands shaking with rage. What you've done isn't just a betrayal of your brother. It's a betrayal of this entire family, he said. Starting today, I'm cutting you off. You can figure out your own university fees. Sam tried to protest, but Dad just hung up. 3 hours later, I was back home, going over the divorce papers. Claire was locked in the bedroom, still sobbing, but I didn't care. My security system pinged. It was Sam. He looked completely unhinged. I opened the door and he exploded. You piece of shit. You ruined everything. You had to go crying to Mommy and Daddy like the pathetic loser you've always been. I said nothing, but he kept going. Claire never loved you. You know that, right? She told me you were boring in bed. She only stayed with you because you were the safe choice. And that kid you've been raising. His lips curled into a vicious sneer. Imagine your son calling you daddy while his real father has been screwing his mom for years. How does that feel? Huh, you pathetic cuck. Something inside me broke. I don't remember making the decision to hit him, but my fist collided with his face. He stumbled back, blood streaming from his nose. You're dead, he screamed, charging at me. He was rage. I was trained. I slipped under his swing and drove a punch straight into his jaw. Another shot to the ribs and he crumpled onto the porch, gasping. You're going to pay for this, he wheezed, bleeding. I'm calling the cops. You assaulted me for no reason. Even now, beaten and humiliated, he was still trying to spin the narrative. 2 days later, the police came. Sam had filed a report claiming I had attacked him unprovoked. That's when I smiled. Give me a second, I said, walking to my laptop. I pulled up the security camera footage from my front porch. The officers watched Sam screaming, charging at me, and me, defending myself with controlled force. That's a clear case of self-defense, the younger cop said. Guy came to your property to pick a fight. They closed the report on the spot. That was the final nail in his coffin. After the divorce, it felt surreal. I had gone straight from living with my parents to living with Claire. I'd never had the chance to just be alone. And you know what? I loved it. No more wondering why my partner was acting weird. No more decoding passive-aggressive silences. No more pretending everything was fine. Just peace, solitude, and freedom. I redecorated the house, stripping it of every reminder of them. Work became my sanctuary, and I was sharper and more focused. The divorce took only 4 months, lightning fast. Having solid evidence and living in an at-fault state gave me a significant edge. Claire tried to fight for the house and alimony, but her position was weak. The paternity test results came back exactly as I had suspected. Sam was Leo's biological father. Even though I had been bracing for that answer, it still hit me like a freight train. It felt like losing a child while gaining a lifelong scar. I had loved Leo. I still loved him. I was the one who had been there for his first steps, taught him to ride a bike, and read him stories at night. But none of that changed the truth on the DNA report. I gave up being his father. Every time I looked at him, I saw Sam's smirk, his eyes, his features. It made me feel physically sick. Maybe that makes me selfish, but I couldn't keep living with that ghost in my house. I needed a clean break. In the end, I got to keep the house, most of our shared assets, and my dignity. Claire? She moved in with Sam. I didn't ask how that arrangement worked. I just imagined the look on her face the first time she realized she wasn't living with the charming rebel she'd idealized, but with a man who couldn't cook, couldn't clean, and had never taken care of anyone but himself. 2 weeks ago, Dad called. "I've been thinking about my will," he said. My chest tightened. "After what Sam did to you, what he did to this family, I can't justify leaving him anything significant. He was changing everything to me, the house, investments, retirement accounts, life insurance, about $1 million in total. Sam will get exactly $100. Just enough so he can't legally contest the will later." I was stunned. This was Dad's way of restoring balance. "There's one condition," he added. "If I pass away before your mother, she keeps the house, even though you'll own it." "Of course," I said. "I want to take care of her." The absolute best part? Sam found out about the will change and was losing his mind. Yesterday, he called me for the first time since the police incident. "Look," he started. "I know we've had our differences, but I'm really struggling financially. Maybe you could talk to Mom and Dad about giving me another chance. Family should stick together, right?" I started laughing. The hypocrisy, the absolute lack of self-awareness. "Family should stick together?" I repeated back, the sarcasm settling in. "That's rich, coming from the guy who stuck with my wife instead." "Come on, man," he whined. "Josephine was just as much to blame as I was. You can't hold this against me forever. I made a mistake, but I'm still your brother." "You're right," I said, my voice flat. "Josephine was equally to blame. That's why I divorced her. And now she's your problem to deal with. Congratulations, you got her. Along with all the responsibilities that come with her." That's when his mask slipped. He started getting aggressive, trying to bully his way back into control. But I wasn't that kid anymore. "Let me make something very clear," I said, cutting him off. "You're no longer the golden child in this family. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them." And then I gave him the final blow. "We're done. Don't call me again." For the first time in our lives, I heard my brother cry. Not fake tears, but real tears. For once, he couldn't charm his way out of the mess he'd created. For once, he was completely alone. And honestly, it felt good. The golden child who had spent his entire life getting everything handed to him was now face to face with reality. He dropped out of college, working part-time construction. Manual labor that left him too exhausted to complain. He was living with Claire, trying to figure out how to afford child support for a kid he never actually planned to raise. Meanwhile, my life was finally starting to feel like mine. My relationship with my parents had never been better. Dad and I go golfing every weekend, talking about real stuff. Mom took longer to come around, but she's here now. She doesn't defend him anymore. And when extended family asks about him, she just says, "Sam's figuring things out," and changes the subject. We have dinner every other Sunday now, and for the first time ever, it actually feels like a family meal. 2 months ago, I got a big promotion at work. My boss told me, "I don't know what changed in your personal life, but you're locked in now. Sharper, more present, more decisive." I smiled. "Divorce?" I told him. "And peace of mind. I'm not dating anyone yet, and I'm not looking either. For the first time, I'm genuinely happy being alone. No secrets, no gaslighting, no pretending everything's fine while my world quietly burns down. The absolute best part? Watching karma do what karma does best. Claire and Sam got exactly what they wanted. Each other, but not the fairy tale version. They got the reality of two selfish people stuck together in a life built on betrayal. And me? I got my freedom, my peace, and my family back. Proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually do win in the end. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.